Hi, I'm Stephanie Gilmore, Curator of Collections and Exhibits at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Today, as part of our Small Wonders video series, I'm going to share information and archival records about the Interstate Commerce Commission, or ICC. If you have visited our Richardson Library at the Colorado Railroad Museum, you have probably viewed copies of valuation maps from the Interstate Commerce Commission. Before we explore the maps themselves, we first need to go over the history of the ICC. The ICC was created to meet the public's demands on regulating all rail lines. After the Civil War, railroad companies were monopolistic and overpowering, as the majority of the companies were privately owned. The first attempts to regulate the railroads came at the state level. Beginning in 1871, the state of Illinois was the first to pass laws regulating railroads. While many other states followed Illinois' example, none of the states had power over interstate commerce. In 1887, the Interstate Commerce Act was created, making the railroads the first industry to be subject to federal regulation. It began with guidelines on how the railroads could conduct business. The most significant outcomes of the ICC were that railroad companies had to submit annual reports to the Commission and were banned from creating their own special rates. The Hepburn Act of 1906 and the Mann-Elkins Act of 1910 made the regulatory power of the ICC more refined. They were able to enact regular rates to all railroads, and those railroads in turn had to create and justify a new reasonable rate to travelers all around. It was an active time for railroads to relinquish power and show the public they were available for travel and commerce at reasonable rates. The government control of the railroads continued to reduce their power as the years went on. Additional acts went into play. For example, the Adamson Act of 1916 established an 8-hour workday for railroad workers. President Woodrow Wilson essentially commandeered the rail lines for the war effort in 1918, putting them entirely under government control until peace treaties were signed. The Esch-Cummins Transportation Act of 1920 allowed railroads to revert back to the control of private investors and began reversing a lot of governmental policies. However, certain anti-monopoly practices remained in place, which allowed mergers of stronger lines with weaker ones at the behest of the ICC. The ICC fixed minimum rates and worked on line extensions and other routes that were abandoned. The influx of new travel methods for both people and commerce was heavily competing with railroads at the same time. Buses, trucks, and cars were being utilized more and more due to their flexibility. Competition between automobiles and trains was quite fierce, as automobiles allowed travelers many alternative ways to travel as opposed to weaving through the countryside on fixed tracks. Between 1920 and 1940, the railroad was still a threat to the public for being too powerful despite losing business to other modes of transportation for a period of over 20 years. The Transportation Act of 1940 did make amends to the Interstate Commerce Act to reach these other industries and not just railroads. This proved difficult since private cars, trucks, and inland water carriers were exempt from government control. In 1958, the government reversed its policy stating railroads were no longer posing a monopoly threat and that the strict regulations that once held tight to these lines could be relaxed. The damage from other modes of transportation took its toll, though. With the introduction of passenger and delivery planes, the railroad's popularity was steadily declining. By 1971, Amtrak was formed by the government for intercity passenger trains. By 1980, the Staggers Act continued railroad deregulation, but the few lines left were already greatly reduced for what they could and could not do. By 1995, the ICC didn't have any other mandates to regulate. Rail lines didn't need rates structured like they did almost a century ago. Therefore, the ICC dissolved its commission into the ICC Sunset Act. As a result, the U.S. Department of Transportation currently oversees the few regulatory tasks that had previously been handled by the ICC. The ICC created railroad valuation records to document details about the railroads from their inception to the 1960s. These documents detailed every aspect of existing railroad systems in the U.S. The majority of the records were created from 1915 to 1920. These records contain information about the railroad facilities existing at a particular location, the land owned by a railroad and how it was acquired, the land adjacent to railroad property, and the financial history of the railroad from its earliest operations to the date of basic valuation. In the museum's collection, we have many ICC maps that were created about 1919. These detailed maps are a favorite source of information for railroad modelers, land surveyors, and people seeking information about property they own that is located near abandoned or active railroad tracks. The museum has arranged some of these maps into convenient booklets that can be studied in our Richardson Library and can also be purchased in our gift shop. Railroads represented in the Richardson Library's ICC collection include the Denver and Rio Grande, Denver and Salt Lake, Colorado and Southern, Colorado Midland, Great Western, Colorado Central, and the Rio Grande Southern. All but the Rio Grande Southern are available in print. The RGS is only available in digital form at this time. In addition to the ICC maps, we also have many annual reports from the railroads as well as accident bulletins. We invite you to visit the Richardson Library to explore these fascinating pieces of railroad history. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Commenting and sharing in particular may qualify as virtual engagements for important funding programs like the SCFD.